Hello, designers, and welcome back. Today, in a very short and to the point three-part video tutorial series, we are going to be going over how to use pre-made mock-up templates in Adobe Photoshop. We are going to be looking at packaging mock-ups today. Any kind of mock-up that you get, whether you're doing a screen, a phone, any tech kind of mock-up, whatever that case might be, poster mock-ups, branding, stationery mock-ups. The process generally is the same dealing with these files. The majority of them are built at least in a similar way pretty much across the board. So once you know the key things to look for, these things are very easy to handle. In part one here, we're going to be looking at how smart objects function in these mockups. This is where we are headed across our three-part series today. I have a mock-up with a front and side view of a simple box package. I'm envisioning that what's inside of here is a t-shirt. I have added a cutout window so that you can see the product on the side view of the box. And on the front, I just have a nice background and some simple character graphics and a brand name. Uh, this is the original package mockup. Um, and when I first open these things, what I like to do is head over right away to the layers panel and turn everything off. I like to flip through here bottom to top as the visibility goes in the layers panel and flip things off and on and see what's in here and get a quick look at kind of how this thing is built. And what we can see is I'm inside of the background folder, and the layer on top here is the wall color. So the wall in the farthest back of the mockup, it has a color fill on it, and it is also masked so that the floor can be a separate color, and that would be this box down here. Now, if I turn back on the main meat of the mockup that is in this folder and then turn off these subsequent folders underneath, I'm going to go ahead and leave the um, background on though. I have the side box, and then above that I have the front face box. Now what you'll notice here, this without this folder on visibility wise called overlay, this looks like a flat vector mockup, almost like a diagram. If there were a couple line indications on the edges of these box, we'd swear that we were in Illustrator, actually. The way that this one is built is that this overlay area actually has a highlight, and then I can turn that off and on. And then this texture layer is actually all the shadowing the side of the box, the horizon line that separates the floor and the wall behind the packaging here. While that works, and that's how some people do it, that just happens to be the way this one is. Um, it does work. It does limit what I can do with this a little bit. Without a lot of fussing around and fixing and stamping and patching things, I really can't use this as just the front of the box or just the side of the box if that was my choice. The other thing about this, the way that these highlights are put in, another thing to look at when you first open up one of these things is where is the light source coming from? And our light in here is coming from the upper left corner shooting down, as we can see by the angle on this shadow right here. Um, so these highlights are actually light being reflected off the package back onto the wall behind and also the floor here. And what I find in this mock-up is that, especially on the left side of the front facing box here, that highlight is just a little too much for me. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. This texture layer, I'm going to copy that, duplicate it by dragging the layer down into the new layer icon. Currently, the blending mode for this layer is set to multiply. What multiply does is pass all the dark information below and does not pass any light information. That makes multiply really good for shadows or when you are trying to pick up texture from a layer that is down underneath where you are working. But what that means, since this is all of our highlight and shadow information, if I take this from multiply to soft light, which actually doesn't pass as much dark and highlights a little bit of the lights, that gives me the level of reflected light that I'm looking for. It's still there, but it's subtle. The key to working with any kind of Photoshop um, composite in the way that we are doing. If you're going for realism, you want to be subtle. You want lighting to look realistic but subtle. These shadows are still in here a little hard, but once we get some color back there, it'll certainly take the edge off that. So this for me does it. It's just enough to be there, but it's not really screaming at me. If we look at the difference, if I just flip the original highlight back on versus my move, to me, this just feels a little better. So I could also, now that I'm done with that, delete that highlight layer. I'm going to go ahead and close the overlay. I want to address this folder that says front face box. That'll be our big box to the left there. And what you'll notice if I pull this out, once you get used to dealing with these, a lot of people are doing coloring the layers. So usually if you see something colored, that's a layer that you need to address specifically. And you'll also notice this layer right here that is, we can see by the thumbnail, a smart object, and also has a mask on it. And that usually is where your graphics go. And as the person who built this mockup indicated, put your design here in all caps so you can't miss it. That's the kind of thing you're looking for as far as placements go in here. So let's look at how this works. First move, double click directly on the smart object in the thumbnail, the smart object icon in the thumbnail. What that does, if I close my adjustments panel here, this opened up a second file called design111.psb. Doesn't matter what it's called. This is a secondary file nested within the layered Photoshop file. So native Photoshop files using this smart object functionality can actually have other files nested inside of them that travel with the original PSD file, so to speak. Um, it's sort of like linking in InDesign, just that everything's in the same place. This is also, if you're familiar with Adobe Dimension, this is also how placing graphics inside of there works. And what it means is your files are completely encapsulated and portable. So when you send these things, post them, download them, everything you need is already in here. Okay, here's all the original crap that's in here that I do not need. So I can go ahead and delete all that. I could delete this too. This is just a color fill layer. Really doesn't matter because I'm going to cover this up. There has to be at least one layer in here. So what I am going to do, I just hit Command F. What I should be doing is showing you where this is at on the menus. Place embedded. You can place linked, but then you're into a situation where you got to keep track of files and make sure your links are always active. We know how big of a pain that can be. If you place embedded, and I'm going to find my background for this first, and I want this little blue stripy dude. And then I'm going to go ahead and get this sized and placed in here the way that I would like it to be. All right, and that works for me. And what you'll notice, now I can go ahead and delete this other layer, What you'll notice, this also placed in here as a smart object. And if I were to double click on this, it would open the original Illustrator file back up in Illustrator. I can make changes, save, and come back here. Helpful because this graphic is actually in here and it's not a live link. It's only a live link through being in here as a smart object. Um, that is one way, place embedded. The other way, and if I go to my actual kind of luchador file, the other way is you can straight copy and paste from Illustrator directly inside of this PSB smart object, and I'm gonna hit paste. It's gonna give me an option, some options here. Smart object or pixels really is the smart move here. And what I want to do is paste this as a smart object, just in case, just in case. And I think he goes about like that. You'll notice now that since this is a smart object, if I double click on that in the thumbnail, it takes me back to Illustrator, but I'm not in the original file. I'm in a new file that I can alter here, save and close, and then go back to Photoshop, and it will have updated my changes without disturbing my original file. Um, I have a couple more things to place in here, starting with this nice big smooshy, smashy blammo graphic from the background. I like to do a move where I soft light and one on multiply to make the color a little more interesting and pass everything through. And then the last thing I need in here is the actual, what we're calling the brand name. So that would be this guy, board 3. Let's take that down just a little, and somewhere in here looks good. I'm going to leave that full up, and then I do believe the next thing I'm going to do is move this up over. Oh, I remember on the other one, I actually had this a little more like this. I'm going to go with this time. That looks good to me. We'll pretend his fist and that burst is looping around back to the other side. So I'm finished in here for now. I'm going to go ahead and save and close. That'll take me back to the original box. I can see my graphics that are inside my smart object. And then the last thing I want to do, if you look at the top of the box and also the side, this box color layer right here that is just a color fill is showing through, and what I want to do is just go ahead and sample somewhere in my medium blue. It's because of the perspective and the way it's receding away from me in space. Um, my lightest blue really isn't going to work, but this medium blue does it. And I know what you're thinking. What about the stripes? You could. Really, I don't think that's going to be visible enough to make it worth time to change. So, okay, so I would go ahead and continue through and do the same moves, getting this panel prepared on the other side. I will see you back for part 2 shortly.